everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Charlie Bynar, who is a gifted international artist and the author of 2 books. Charlie's remarkable artistry shines so brilliantly in her portrait of David Bowie, the legendary icon of music, creativity, and transformation, that it was showcased in the Victoria and Albert Museum's renowned 5-year traveling exhibition, David Bowie Is, cementing its place in the celebration of artistic legacy. In 2017, Charlie endured an unimaginable loss when her cherished son, Isaac, tragically passed away at just 16 years old. As she navigated the depths of her grief, Charlie faced yet another devastating challenge. Her husband, Chris, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He transitioned 3 years later at the age of 57. Charlie and the Rainbow Trout is a heartfelt story of perseverance, compassion, and a deep love for nature. Her second book, Through the Darkness, a story of love from the other side. It explores grief, healing, and the enduring bond Charlie now shares with Isaac, a connection that transcends time and space. Through the Darkness is the #1 new release in 3 categories on Amazon's Kindle ebook. And why am I not surprised at that? It's just wonderful. Isaac had a deep fascination with ants because he admired their social structure and community-oriented behavior, believing that humanity could learn valuable lessons from their cooperation. In honor of his memory, Charlie founded Isaac's Ant Foundation, an initiative dedicated to bringing immersive and educational ant exhibits to venues across the country, including the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Through her art, writing, and advocacy, Charlie continues to touch countless lives. I'd like to also add that Charlie is working across the veil with Isaac in a similar way to how I am working across the veil with my husband, Saul. This parallel experience serves as a powerful validation for both of us and reinforces our knowing that death is an illusion. I'm looking forward to talking with Charlie, who'll be speaking to us from Flagstaff, Arizona, about how Isaac's transition brought about her profound spiritual awakening, her initial experiences with mediums Tara and Allison DuBois, direct messages that Charlie has received from Isaac, Charlie's roadmap for navigating grief, her book, Through the Darkness, a story of love from the other side, which she wrote with Isaac after he transitioned, the important life lessons about forgiveness that Charlie has learned, why big events happen to change our paths, and so much more for a healing and transformational interview that surely will be filled with enlightening insights. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hey, Charlie, a heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Irene. Honored to be on your podcast. You're such a wonderful person, and I really love how uplifting you are and bubbly and energetic, and you're just a pleasure.
Thank you. And the sentiment is returned to you. One of the perks of this podcast, I must say, is I get to meet Charlie. I get to meet so many amazing people, and just wonderful to know you.
And then we also get to meet all of your guests because we watch your show. So that's kind of like, we're all in it together there.
Yeah, we're definitely a loving collective, I would say, right?
Yep.
So, right. So let's start by telling people about Isaac, the reason that he had medical issues that brought about his death at 16, your relationship with him, and how he transitioned, so we can start to understand that first part of the.
Okay. First, I'll just show you my little book here. There's Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
I was extremely disturbed to find out that during the processes, when Isaac died when he was 16, he died from a seizure. And the seizure was brought on by a brain injury that he had sustained during birth. I went into labor on Christmas Eve. And so, during the holidays, people get distracted. I went in about 6:30 in the evening, and they did a fetal heart monitor, and they checked everything. And the person, the midwife there was, I had a midwife and a doctor, but the midwife was there, and she said, go ahead and go home, because it could be false labor. Could be. Later, when I started investigating this, because after Isaac died, I needed to know I needed the answer. And I found one of the nurse's notes that said during that time when we were there at 6:30, they did a fetal heart monitor, and on that fetal heart monitor, it showed that he was having D cells that were non-reassuring, which means your heart is already in trouble. And had they actually delivered him then, he would have been most likely fine. But they waited 25 and a half hours later, Christmas Eve at 8 o'clock. So he had been being strangled. He had the cord around his neck twice, which is why you watch the fetal heart monitor, because that shows you the condition of the heart. And if it's dipping and it's not coming back up, there's something wrong. So it wasn't, of course, their fault that the cord was around their neck, but had they paid attention, then they could have delivered him then. But they sent me home, and I went home like they told me, and I came back the next morning, and then they still waited until 8 o'clock that evening for him to. Right. And so by then, he had already suffered a hypoxic brain injury. His O2 level during the blood gas value from the time of delivery was 9%. It's supposed to be 60 or 40. I mean, it was a critical value. And then, so because he had a brain injury at birth, then everything from there on was very, very difficult for him. He scored really low on math and reading in school. He was considered severely handicapped. Wow. And he didn't have a physical look that was handicapped. It was all because of a brain injury. And so when people are struggling with their brain, it's often people don't understand because the kid looks normal. The person looks normal, but it's not. And as a result of a brain injury, then you get secondary and tertiary insults, which are like, well, then you have severe challenges of reading and writing, and then he develops seizures, because seizures are a secondary insult from the initial brain injury. The brain just isn't working correctly. And so he died from a seizure. So he died indirectly from that brain injury that could have been easily prevented had they just watched the fetal heart monitor and delivered him on the first sign of distress. But they waited to 25 and a half hours.
Wow. And yeah. I know we're going to talk about, as we go on during the interview, about how you were able to forgive this, which is just amazing. And how you dealt with this when he passed, transitioned. So let me ask you, and with your relationship with him, you can tell from your book and everything about Isaac that you were very close to him, and you must have been protective of him, because it couldn't be easy for him, looking great and not being able to do ththings. I'm sure that
it was a horrible struggle for him every day.
Horrible struggle, and he probably got teased by kids, and it was probably.
He got bullied. He got bullied at school for being a handicapped kid that he had to go to reading class, and he couldn't read, and he had a hard time reading.
That poor kid.
He scored 1 to 3% in reading and writing, and then they would force him to stand up in front of the class and read.
Oh my God.
And it was humiliating. And here's another huge tragedy in this, is that Isaac was one of 250,000 people that are a result of that die as a result of medical errors. In the United States, it's considered the third leading cause If you look at the John Hopkins report, so it's a credential that you cannot beat. John Hopkins medical.
Wow.
And they did an 8-year study that states that basically medical errors lead to the third leading cause of death, but the CDC doesn't track it, and therefore they're not reported, and therefore there's no encouragement to fix the problem. So we just get a whole bunch of people dead.
Oh my, that's horrible.
My son was just one of 250,000 people that year that died.
So tragic.
It's a national tragedy that no one has addressed.
No one, well, we're letting a lot of people know about it now.
Yeah. And so it's like, that's not, and for me, that was like, that is not okay that my son died because
no way is that okay. So now you love him, you protect him. He eventually transitions, and then this brings about this. You didn't believe, you were a skeptic.
I was a total skeptic. I was a little bit on the fence. I wasn't completely on the other side. I was a little on the fence, and I only say that because I had some paranormal experiences as a younger person, and my mom's family had like lots of them. They were like all over in her family. And so I had heard about these things, but I was kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, right. So all of a sudden now Isaac transitions. And what happened to you? Because I also had a profound spiritual awakening. Tell us about yours.
Sure.
That took you from your skepticism to holy moly. Oh, wow. Look at this.
Yeah. Okay. That's a long little journey, but I'll try to like summarize it. Well, 2 weeks after he crossed, and you're right, we were like soulmates. He and I were just thick as thieves. And we had spent many years, just him and I, and I just really loved everything about him. Like I was that mom that I wanted to make him mashed potatoes and I wanted to put butter on him, and I just wanted to sit at the table and watch him eat. And I was just like happy that his tummy was full, and I just got great satisfaction out of just watching him be happy. His happiness was mine. And I was just like, I just love that little dude so much. Anyway, so 2 weeks after he crosses, and it was brutal because he had a seizure, and I had a feeling that there was something wrong, and I was at work, and
wow.
And I told my ex-husband, to go to my house and to check on Isaac, because he was just maybe like a mile from my house. And he was actually the one that found Isaac on the floor, and they resuscitated him. They got a pulse, but and he was brain dead, but they took him to the hospital, and I was driving from Winslow to home 45 minutes away, and it took everything in my power to get home. And I got to the hospital, and he was brain dead, but his heart was alive, and I knew he was stuck in this in-between place, and I didn't really know what to do, and I was just devastated. And I laid next to him. I just needed to lay next to him. I just couldn't let him go at that minute. I needed to lay next to him. I laid next to him, and I held his hand, put my hand on his chest, and then I was just like, you gotta. So I laid there for like an hour, and then I got up and I said, I'm gonna go ahead and ask the doctor to pull the plug, basically. And I asked I asked Isaac's dad if he was okay with that, and he said yeah. And so I went and talked to the doctor, and I let him go. And they they pulled the vent, and the cardiac meds that were pumping his heart 140 a minute. He was just in agony, and so I just needed to let him go. And so I let him go, and of course then I was just in pure darkness. And 2 weeks later, it's like 2 weeks, I was sleeping, and I couldn't see Isaac, but I knew he was there. I couldn't see him, and I felt him right here, right next to my ear, and I heard him say, "I miss you." It was in a dream, but then it was like, normal dreams are very chaotic and nonsensical, but then there was like a moment of clarity where everything was clear, and there he was, and I could hear him, and he said, "I miss you." And my heart pounded, and I'm like, "I miss you too." And then I woke up because I was just so like, it was like a panic, and I just sat on the side of the bed, and I was like, oh my God, I think Isaac was talking to me from the other side. And I didn't know
And
what
you
to
were
make.
skeptical, and like you were
Yeah,
skeptical, and all of a sudden, like this thing is happening for you.
right. And I didn't know what to make of it. And of course, then I told my husband, who's a civil engineer. And so like, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So I tell him that I'm like, I think Isaac's talking to me in my dreams. And he thinks I'm completely crazy.
She's
right?
overwhelmed with grief.
Yeah, he's like, oh my gosh, now we're gonna have this going on too, like my wife's gonna go crazy also. And so it was a long journey to on the fence to no longer on the fence of being absolutely sure, because I was very skeptical. I searched science, I searched religion, I searched everything I could to get an answer, that because I needed proof. I needed something that was real tangible that could convince me. And so I would read science, and some of the science was really interesting. I found some really interesting things about quantum mechanics and things like that, and entangled particles, which I think was really wonderful. And I learned some things about religion, and some of that resonated too. But I still just was like, not really sure. But the thing that really got me was so I kept getting these little messages. I got 4 messages from Isaac in my dreams. One was the I miss you. And then the second one was, I wish you knew that in dreams are a way for people to communicate with people on the other side. He was basically trying to help me with my doubt of not trusting the process. He's like, dreams are a way of people.
He was educating you.
He was educating me in my dreams. And then I kept getting all these other crazy things that would happen. And, my husband and I would sit at the kitchen table, and we were talking about Isaac, and the light in the living room would flash on. It never flashed on before, and it never flashed on after. It was just 5 times flashing that conversation. It was the craziest thing. We had many, many things that would happen like that, but some that were very, that really get your attention. Those were kind of some of the smaller things, but some things that really got my attention was, I went to go see this medium, Tara.
Right.
And anyway, she said that she asked me to do this meditation, because she goes, your heart's really hurting, and you need this, and you need to be able to see if you can get a hold of Isaac. And so do this meditation. And she said the meditation is to lay in bed and count everything that happened in your day backwards. So the last thing I did before I got into bed was I brushed my teeth. Before that, I put my pajamas on. So you're getting rid of all the noise of the day, and then you're just going to do this little meditation. And the meditation is to think of a garden, and that it's your garden. So you get to make up the garden the way you want it. If you're British, maybe it'll be a British garden, right? But Isaac loved Japanese culture, and so my garden was a Japanese garden. And she said, you're going to meet your loved one, meet Isaac on the bridge, because that's where the 2 places meet, right? That's our meeting place.
Right. I've often been told that people either go over a bridge or through a tunnel. Those seem the 2 places, right?
Yeah. So I was going to meet him on the bridge. And so as I walked through this garden, I saw a little boy standing on the bridge, and I was like, oh my gosh, could that be him? And so my heart's beating, and I hurry my pace, and I get to the bridge. And when I stand on the edge of the bridge, he turns to me, and I see him, and I just grab him. I run to him and grab him, and I'm like, oh my God, Isaac. So this is the meditation, remember? So I just grabbing him. I like, Isaac, I love you so much. Please, I need to find a way to get through this. This is too hard. I need help. I need a sign. I just need to know that you're there. I need to know that you're alive, and I need to know that you're okay. I've always figured that if I knew he was okay and that he was alive, I would find a way. I would be okay. So I asked him for a sign. And at the time, my husband had been diagnosed. At this time, my husband had been diagnosed with cancer, and he was sleeping in our room. And since I was still a nurse, and he was really restless sleeper, had to sleep in the other room. I was actually in Isaac's room when I did this meditation, because then I was by myself. And everybody had gone to bed. Everybody was asleep. The dogs were asleep. The cat was asleep. Everybody was asleep. And I'm just doing this meditation. And then actually then my cat came and jumped up on my chest, and I was like, oh my God, and it brought me out of that meditation. And then I kind of decided to I went to sleep, and then I woke up a slight moment later, and there was a light on in the hall. And I was like, what's the light on in the hall? I got up to go find out what the light was. And the motion sensor in the laundry light had been triggered. It had just come on by itself. And nobody was up. And I was like, oh my God, that was Isaac for sure. I knew that it was Isaac. And from that day on, he would pop the light on like maybe 3, 4, or 5 times a day.
Wow.
Just out of the blue. I would be in the kitchen, nobody would be home, the laundry light would come on. I'd be like, hi, Isaac. That was his total go-to. He would just pop that light on all the time.
Wow.
And, now that I'm doing better and I'm okay, he doesn't pop the light on because he got me through that.
He got you through it. But what a fabulous sign. And Tara also taught you about 2 sides of a coin when it comes to our life lessons and the big picture in general. So that began your journey to some spiritual wisdom, right? So what did she teach you in that session?
Well, regarding the 2 sides of the coins, that was kind of, it's hard to digest for a lot of people, and it was hard for me to digest, but, there's like a difficult lesson in life and that there's 2 sides of the coin. And so lessons aren't necessarily good or bad. These things that happen to us aren't necessarily good or bad. They're just 2 sides of the coin. Like when you give something to somebody, you're giving, but then the other side of that coin is receiving. Or, and so you have to do both of those exchanges to learn the gifts of both places. If you're only that person that can give, and you can't receive, kindness from somebody, then you need to work on that a little bit. It's just 2 sides of the same coin, but all lessons are kind of like that. And some of them are easier than others, but some of them are really tough, like the death of a loved one. That's a pretty tough side of the coin.
I would say so. And I want to ask you also that you got some real great messages from your cat Schmiggs, right? And you've got another great story about Schmiggs to share with us.
Yeah.
So Schmiggs was in on it with Isaac. It sounds like to me.
My kitty cat, he was I know I've lost him since, but he's on to the spirit world. But
he's with Isaac.
He's hanging with Isaac, but one of my favorite ones was 2 of them was I had just come home from Europe, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, and and it was just like when I knew that Isaac was around, his presence was around, like when he would pop the light on in the laundry room. And sometimes you just feel that they're there. You have to get this whole experience is you have to fine tune your senses, because it's really subtle. It's not like a big screaming, thing. But there we were, and Smiggy was sitting on the kitchen table, and he was craning his neck around the hall to see like who was there. Somebody was standing there, or someone or something. I couldn't see anything, but my cat sure could. And it really got his attention. He kept looking and looking. I mean, it was like 3 or 4 times, and then he actually took off because he was like, I'm out of here. But
he was weirded out a little.
He was a little weirded out. Like he could clearly see or sense something and my sister was there with me, and we were both looking at him, looking at whatever he was looking at. And it was really kind of crazy. And that kitty, I loved him so much. When Isaac was in kindergarten, they had a raffle, like a school fundraiser. And it was like, one of the baskets that you could win was all these cat things, cat bed, cat food, cat toys, cat everything. And he won the basket. And then he was like, well, Mom, we have the basket, but we don't have a cat.
Right.
And so I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he was like, let's go get a cat. And I'm like, sure, okay, let's do that. And so we went to the second chance place, and we got this Norwegian black and white cat. He looks just like Sylvester, and he really does act like Sylvester too. He's little ornery thing sometimes too, but he was also just a love. And I loved him so much. And we got him when Isaac was kindergarten, and we had him 17 years. He's an old kitty cat. Yeah, 17 years. And so, but he was getting kidney failure. And And it was another one of those times where it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to let him go. And I really don't want to, but I don't want him in misery either. And so I had a vet come over to my house, and I put him in my lap, and I had the vet let him go. And then the vet left. So the vet has already left. My kitty cat's already passed, and he's still sitting in my lap. And I'm just sitting on the couch, and I'm crying because I love that cat so much. I really love cats, and I loved him lots. And then I felt his purring in my legs, like the purring sensation of when you can feel a cat purring in your legs when they're sitting on your lap. He was doing that, but he was already crossed, and he was happy to go because he was in such misery. And I had never experienced a thing like that from an animal.
It was sort of like a shared death experience in a way that you had with him.
With the animal, with my kitty cat. And I was just like, okay, I did the right thing. And he was just free. I was just happy he was free and restored to perfect health, right?
Right. And do you believe yet? Are you believing yet?
I know. And you know, exactly. The thing is when you first get one little message, you're kind of like, I wonder what's going on. And then it builds, and then you get these really big messages, or these, and then it just becomes more validating.
Right. And now you're about sold. And then you had also, you met with the world famous medium, Allison DuBois.
Yeah. And her reading.
Right. And then that was a life-changing reading for you.
It was a life-changing reading. Absolutely. Because I was still a little on the fence.
Did that happen after Schmiggs?
Actually, Schmiggs passed after I published the book. After like a year later. But it was just part of the Schmiggs story. But a couple things that Tara had told me was that I found that was really wonderful from her is that she kind of approached things big picture instead of like the really small details. And the big picture is that everything is as it should be. And, when I first heard her say that, I was like, are you crazy? Because my kid, died from medical negligence. And so that's a hard process. That's a hard one to process.
Right.
But she told me about the life lessons, and she told me about my husband, Chris. And I was like, ooh, she had some things that were like spot on. But I just still was a little on the fence, because I was probably having a hard time with that idea of everything is as it should be. Now I totally get it, and it is as it should be. These events happen because that's what's supposed to happen. In order for lessons to be learned, and in order for us to grow and things of that nature. But when you're not used to that idea, that's a hard one to stomach.
Yeah, we take on tough lessons.
Right, but we have these tough lessons, and so they are not tough without being tough, right?
Right.
I mean, but that's, the thing is like when you climb a really big, tall mountain, and you're like, that was a real tall mountain for me, and I did it, and I got to the top. That's a reward and a victory in yourself. And it's the same thing with a soul journey or a spiritual awakening. It's hard work sometimes. Getting to the top of the mountain isn't real easy, but it's worth doing. Yeah.
Right.
So when I went to see Allison, then I went and saw Allison. And because I had watched the movie or the series Medium,
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's really crazy. No, there's no way somebody could like hold a picture of a dead person and figure out where their body is or something like that. I just thought that was like way too far out. And then my sister she goes, why don't you go see Allison DuBois? And I was like, the one from the Medium. And I'm like, that's a real person? I had no idea. I didn't really realize it was a real person. Anyway,
and she was in Arizona, right?
And so I was like, oh my God, I can book a reading with her. So I was like all on board because I had already done the work on reading about science and religion. And I was looking for any darn answer I could find because I had all these crazy things happening to me. And they were just like these great big question marks hanging over my head. And I needed answers, Right. And so I went and saw Allison, and she's such a lovely lady. She's really very sweet. And she puts you completely at ease right away. And so she said, we talked about my husband first. And she said things that came to pass. I would say 99% of everything she said was absolutely 100% spot on or came to pass. Like, I didn't know it, but it was going to happen. So that was like, whoa.
It's
That
like,
was
what do we have to have? What else do we have to show you here, Charlie?
Yeah,
We
and
understand this.
so anyway, the morning that I went to go see her, and this was really a good one. The morning I went to see her, I was nervous because she's real famous, and because I was worried about Isaac, like, can you actually talk to the dead? And if so, then what is he going to say, and how's that going to go? And I was apprehensive about the entire thing. So there I was, nervous and kind of a wreck, and in my closet trying to figure out what to wear. And I had like a shirt on, but I needed something else because I always have to have like a second thing. That's just how I am. And so I'm looking for a sweater, or I don't know what I was looking for. But I kept looking, and I'm like, no, can't wear that, can't wear that. I just don't know what to wear. And I just was all kind of in a mess. And then my eyes landed on Isaac's hoodie. And I was like, that's it. So I like put it on. It's like putting, it's kind of like getting a hug from Isaac, right?
Right.
And so it was his hoodie. It's a very generic looking hoodie, by the way. But it was his. So then I go to the meeting. Allison puts me at ease right away. And I told you how much Isaac and I love to be together. It was really very mutual. He would always say, I just want to hang out with you, Mom. And he would tell me, like, what did he tell me? He goes, the best thing about our relationship is not that we're mom and son. It's just that we're best friends. And
I get
that was the relationship we had. Anyway, so Allison sits me down. And that, of course, melted my heart because I was just like, anyway, so Allison sits me down and she's like, we talk about my husband and about him having been diagnosed with cancer because he had been diagnosed at the time. We talked about that. Things that she said came true months later, just as she said. And I was like, whoa. So I didn't know it at the time during the reading, but it all came to play, came to pass. And anyway, then she says, okay, we've talked about Chris, your husband. And then who do you want to, bring in from the other side? And I said, my son, Isaac. And she goes, okay, let me connect with him. And she gets this piece of paper and she makes these circles, and you can hear the graphite pencil on the paper for like 4.5 minutes. And then she'll stop and write something down. And then, so I'm just sitting there kind of waiting for her to do her thing, right? And then she goes, the first thing that he wants you to know is that you guys were best friends. And I was like, of course, that's exactly what he would say. That's exactly what he would say. And then she started laughing. And I go, what? What's funny? And she goes, he tried to get you to wear his hoodie today.
And you got his hoodie on.
And I was like, this one? Not this, but I had it on. And that moment, I knew Isaac was alive and well on the other side, because those two things, just even that, I knew that sensation of when I was in the closet and I got that little heart tug. It's like a little whisper. It's just like a little whisper, like, do this. And and that was Isaac whispering at me. And now it's that intuition. It's like little whispers from the other side. That moment, I left her reading knowing that Isaac was alive and well on the other side. And I called my sister, who was really concerned about me because she's my rock. And, everybody else was kind of, and anyway, I called her and she was like, oh my God, I can tell it in your voice. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Because until that moment, I wasn't okay. And she goes, you're going to make it. You're going to be okay. And it really did. It changed my life.
That's fantastic.
But she went on for like an hour with stuff like that.
Oh my
with,
God.
Like this happened and that and the tattoos. And she knew everything.
She knew everything.
And, and so it was like, it was because Isaac knew everything. Right.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. And so she told me that even Isaac, he said right before he left, he felt the heartbeat right next to him in the bed where I laid.
Oh my God.
Where I laid next to him before I let him go. He said it was a really terrible place, but I remember my mom's heart beating, and I remember that being a wonderful thing. I could feel her heart next to my body. I
Oh
mean,
my
he knew
God.
stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
So there is absolutely no bloody way that anyone would know that. No
Right.
one except Isaac. And I mean, I was like, okay, I got my answers,
I got
man.
it. It changes your life. I mean, I had the same experience when John Edward channeled my husband, and there was such. And I was like you. I was a skeptic, and like the evidence that came through was undeniable. It changes your life. You're like uplifted. Oh my God, they're not gone from me forever. I'm
Right,
going to
we're
be with
still
them
connected to
again. You're
them.
still connected.
We're still part of each
Right,
other's lives.
right. It's just so it's actually elevating. It changes the whole
Dynamic.
dynamic of it. I mean, you still have grieving to do and all of that, but this is such an unbelievable piece. And I know you got other signs also through a hawk and through Aunt Mabel. You want to tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Sure, I'll tell you about the hawk, but if I forget, then remind me about Aunt Mabel. But here is the funny thing. So Isaac was able to get through to me pretty well. First of all, I was seriously needing help, and I felt like he was trying to rescue me because he was so desperate
Sure,
to
he
get,
was.
he was desperate to get a hold of me so I wouldn't like lose it because I didn't want to live. I mean,
You wanted to
when
go and be with him.
yeah, I thought, well, if there is an afterlife and if I can be with him, then I could just kind of figure out a way to, go. And then at least I could be with him, but it's a crazy abstract thought. But when you're in a moment of depression or a crisis like that, logic doesn't always necessarily play out very well, right?
Right.
And so that's a grieving mind. And but anyway, so he was able to get a hold of me. I got the messages in the dream and I got the laundry light popping on. Oh my God, that was an awesome one. And Smiggy, when he jumped up on, well, in that meditation, I'm sorry, in that meditation, when I looked at Isaac on the bridge, his eyes were this like bright green because he has green eyes. And then when Smiggy jumped up on my chest right during that meditation, he looked at me with his bright green eyes. And I was just sort of like, But it was kind of a strange thing. But
Right.
Anyway, I'm getting a little off track here.
That's right.
So, but anyway, so I was easier to convince. I was easier to get through to than Chris. So Chris was like, "How come I can't get any messages?" Or, you get all these messages, and he's thinking that I'm crazy. But he started reading one of Allison DuBois books, and he, read some things about how certain things that can prevent a person from receiving a message, and some of the alternative routes that loved ones on the other side might take in to get a hold of somebody if they're really having a hard time getting a message through. And when I went and saw Tara, she said, I just want to tell you that Isaac's going to come through as a hawk. And I told Chris that, and he's like, a hawk? And I go, I don't know. I'm just telling you what happened. And so he was like, okay, whatever. And, because he's this engineer guy, he's not really receptive to.
Left brain. Just show
Yeah.
me the evidence. Show me the facts. I
Just
don't
show me
want
the
what is
facts,
this
man.
gravy stuff.
Yeah, he wasn't really open to that. He wanted to be, he kind of his heart kind of wanted to be, but he wasn't. And anyway, so, months later, as things are going on, and Chris has been diagnosed with cancer. I'm working during the day as a nurse, 12-hour shifts. And so Chris was home taking care of himself because he had started this new drug, a trial drug that actually gave him it bought him like 4 months of time, 4 or 5 months of pretty quality time where he could go biking and skiing and stuff which he loved to do. And so he was at home, and I was at work, and I came home that evening, and he goes, "Oh my God, something just crazy happened to me today. And I've been dying to tell you all day long, but you were at work and I could call you. And anyway, this is just a really crazy thing that happened to me today." And I'm like, "Okay, what? What happened?" And he was like, I sit it down at the kitchen table with him. He's like drinking a beer because he was still stressed and from this whole event. And I'm like, "What happened?" And he goes, "I went for a bike ride like I usually do, and then I went across the street to get the mail from the post, from our boxes. And on my way home, I a hawk dive bombed me so much that I had to like dunk to get out of the way, and then that hawk flew into a tree, like was stunned, hit and fell to the ground, and kind of like shook his head and came to and flew away. And Chris was just like, and that actually really happened. And he goes, I'm like, I just don't know what. He goes, that was Isaac. And I go, yeah, Isaac is trying
Dad, I even dive bombed you to get your
I
attention.
know, so
what does it
like,
take, Dad? I knocked the bird out to get you.
Right. And so it was really cute because it was like Isaac's desperate way to get a hold of Chris, like, wake up, buddy.
Wake up.
I'm here. And so that moment, Chris was like, I used to always guess you about. I always used to think you were going a little bit crazy with all the stuff that you've been telling me for the last couple years, because this time frame is 2.5, 3 years after Isaac's death. And he said, I used to think you were kind of going a little crazy, but now I get it. And that's the thing is that I've noticed is that people often doubt when they have no what's the word I'm looking for? They have no reference point. When you have no reference point to something, you don't understand it. But then when you do have a reference point to it, like, oh, because that happened to me, now I have a reference point. Now it makes sense. But when you don't have a reference point, it doesn't make sense. That's why Skeptic is very hard to bridge that.
Right. But the other thing I'm thinking about is the fact that it must have made it easier. Chris's time came to transition, that this had happened to him.
Yeah, no, there was
that took a little element of fear away from him, didn't it?
Well, so that was just the beginning of Chris's journey on healing, with the idea of death not being the end, because he was very sick and we didn't know it at the time, but his time was very limited. And so he actually had a short time to learn anything that he was going to hear before he, crossed over. And I think that is one of the most beautiful aspects about the journey in the book, is that the gift that Isaac gave Chris was to know that death was an illusion, that death was not the end, that he would be reunited with his loved ones as he crossed. And so to give that, Isaac gave that gift to Chris and me from the other side, to know that that death is not the end, that our time here on earth is just like one page of a never-ending story. So it's just a new chapter or whatever. And so when Chris actually died, it was a good death. It was a death. He had fought a good battle. He had fought a great battle. We had done everything we possibly could, and he wanted to die at home. And I was in Houston with him, and I drove him home after not sleeping for a day.
Wow.
And 20-hour straight drive through the night from Houston. And I got him home and I got him in bed and I laid him down. And the very last thing he tried to say was, I love you. And he got the I part, and then he couldn't because he was so weak. And I was like, I know, I got it. And he closed his eyes and that was it.
How beautiful, though.
Yeah. And so he was at home. It was a death of his choosing. And so, and now I know that Isaac helped us get him home.
And I'm sure Isaac greeted him right
instrumental.
away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And so that was a good death. And that's another aspect that I kind of like about the book that I wasn't even aware of. It just happened organically, I guess, is that the book starts with Isaac's death, and it was the most tragic, horrible event possible. And then the book closes with Chris's death, and it's a good death. And so it really makes you think differently about death altogether.
The whole thing.
Right. The whole thing is so, gee, what a journey.
It's unbelievable. Well, I know, I want to ask you about Aunt Mabel. And I know that from all of this, and you talk about this in your book, that you've got a roadmap now for navigating grief, which helps people move through the darkness of grief and it's quite a bit of quicksand when it comes to grief. And then also that you channeled your book with Isaac. 3 things I'm hitting you with right now. We want to hear about Aunt Mabel, your roadmap for navigating grief, and the process of your writing the book with Isaac.
Okay, well, let's see if we can get through the navigating through grief. Don't stay fixed in that darkness, because you have to move through it to get those gifts. You can't, well, I mean, you can't, everybody has a choice on how to deal with anything. The way that I found my way through that dark place and grief was to keep learning and keep going and keep growing in my heart and being more spiritually awakening to the idea and the truth of the afterlife is true. That we are just, that this experience here is just very temporary. It's not by no means the whole, it's a small part of us, it's a teeny piece. And so when you take that perspective, that this is just a temporary piece of us, there is no division. Death can't separate you from your loved ones, and it can't divide you, and you still have a story with them. You're still connected to them. Right. Irene, just you and Saul have a journey still that you have. It's a different right. It's a different dynamic, yeah. But you still have a journey with him, and my journey is still the same too. It's changed, and I've had to adjust to it. But how wonderful is it that our loved ones are on a journey with us from the other side? That's a brilliant gift. So we can be really happy about that.
Right. And it takes away the fear of death for us when it's our turn, because
absolutely. So there is no fear of death. It was like Chris, when he crossed, he was not afraid of death. He knew Isaac and his mom would come and get him and his other loved ones. So there wasn't a fear. He was ready to go, and he met it gracefully. And so it does take that fear away from you about the idea of death and the afterworld.
If people take nothing else from this interview, this is it. That they don't have to have that much, they don't have to be filled with fear if their loved one is passing or something is going on, that they will see them again, they will be with them again, that there is more. If they take nothing else, and there's tons to take from this interview, but if nothing else is that knowing.
That's the huge gift, because that's always the question that we have, what is life? What is death? It's always going around. And then when you have like an answer that stops that rat on the wheel, it's like such a beautiful gift I'm so grateful to Isaac for having, although that journey was so hard to go through, look at the gift that he gave me and Chris. And so I'm so grateful to him.
Because you almost took your life, but if you hadn't gotten those messages and everything, you wouldn't still be here sharing your story with us today.
Right. And Isaac is, like Allison said, she goes, he's a bright white light, like what people would consider an angel. And he's going to look after you, and he's going to be there when you cross. And so it's like, that just stunned me. It stunned me because my little sweetie was still with me, and that he was helping me from the other side when I thought I was lost and so sad. And there he was watching after me and trying his very bestest to take care of his mom.
Absolutely.
And how beautiful is that?
That's so beautiful, Charlie. What more?
There is just nothing.
You would want him physically to hug him, but in his own way, he's hugging you all the time.
All the time.
It's beautiful.
And so
you're living your life in a way that he sees. That's a hug back to him.
Right. And so that's just a humongous gift. But you have to go through that journey to get to the gifts. You can't just stay in that dark place, and it's like climbing the mountain. Sometimes it's very tiring. Sometimes you have to take a break and get a snack, and then you keep going on your journey up to the top of the mountain. And that's like the grief journey. You have to keep going in order to get to the top of the mountain, or to where those gifts are. So it's a huge thing. You have to keep working at it and keep going. Don't surrender.
Don't surrender to it. Love yourself through it, and know that you can get through it.
Yeah, it's an absolutely difficult journey, so you got to be kind and patient with yourself.
Absolutely. And I want to know, what else would you like to tell everyone about your book? Is there anything, first of all, you channeled the book with Isaac, right? So you could hear him coming through, or how did you?
No, I didn't even know I was channeling him when I was writing the book. I just felt very compelled to write the book. For one, what happened to him wasn't okay with me, and I was struggling with the hospital and with the medical records, and that my kid died needlessly, and my heart needed fine answers. So I spent like a year investigating his records from the hospital.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I requested fetal heart monitors from him, and they pushed back for 11 months, and they said, oh, we found him, but we can't print him, and we'll get back to you. And I mean, they pushed back many, many times. So I was, in my mind, in the beginning, and this is a really cool thing. Allison, she goes, during the interview, during the reading, she goes, you and Isaac could write a book together. And I was like, what? I mean, I'm not an author. I'm a nurse. I don't even know what you're talking about.
This is such a familiar story to me because I lived it too. God.
I know, exactly. So then you're like, what?
But
you're crazy.
I grew up playing the violin. What are you telling me? I should write a book.
Right.
You did the same thing.
And it's not even a small book. I mean,
Right.
It's like a hefty thing. But anyway, in the beginning of it, I just started writing my story down and about the medical records and blah, blah, blah. And, and I can't remember exactly. I just started writing. And then I was writing, I'd like to get a chapter about some of these ideas about forgiveness and things like that are really important to us as a human being. And so I thought that this would be a really great way to do it is as if I had the other side, because I felt Isaac was so much there, and because he showed himself to me so many times. And so I created the other side in the book. And as I kept writing it, like I would be writing and I can just sit there and type on my computer, and it's kind of relaxing for me. It's just an easy thing to do. Anyway, but I would just say these words and I'd be like, I wonder where that would come from, because that's like, I'm not that smart.
Yeah,
Isaac was always much more wise than me. When he was 8, he comes to me when he was 8 years old, and he goes, Mom, what's the greatest force in nature? And I was like, well, I'm a scientific minded person at the time. So I was like, well, supernova, and then I explained what a supernova was. And he goes, okay. And then he runs off. And 3 days later, he comes back to me and he goes, I have the answer. And I'm like, to what? And he goes, the greatest force in nature. And I'm like, oh, you do? And I go, okay, well, I mean, I'm dying to know what it is. And he goes, time, because without time, nothing happens.
Oh, wow.
Because without time, nothing happens. It's stagnant. It's motionless.
And meanwhile, he had trouble reading.
Yeah,
in his class. Look how brilliant he was by nature.
Right. In his inner being, his spirit is such a wise little soul. And so he just knew stuff like that. And so I'd be like, oh, that's got to be Isaac or something, because I'm just not that clever. I would write something like, Chris learned one of his lessons was to learn to love, to have unconditional love. And I would write something like, unconditional love has no shield that's based on trust. And I'm like, I don't even know where that came from. I mean, that's not me.
That's slipping in. And that happens to me a lot too. It really does. And I really want to talk about the fact, and you talk about this in your book, and I'm really encouraging people to read it because it's a wonderful book. But a very important life lesson about forgiveness that you talk about in the book. Because first of all, you have another interesting story about forgiveness with your Aunt Mabel that you may want to mention now, but also the fact that you found a way to let go and forgive the hospital staff and management for what they did. Talk about that huge lesson, because I think that's one of our biggest lessons.
Yeah.
It really, because by holding on to these things, we hurt ourselves so much, but it's so hard to let go of them.
Yeah. Okay. First, I'm just going to I want to talk about Aunt Mabel, and then we will go that. My Aunt Mabel is, in the book, there's my Aunt Melba. My Aunt Melba was murdered when she was in her, she was pretty young, and she was murdered by a serial killer. It was really gruesome and really horrible. And it was, the ripples through the family was just, it was devastating to everybody.
Horrible.
Just awful. And it was my mom's sister. And she was a twin sister, Mabel and Melba. So Mabel is the twin sister of Melba. Melba's on the other side with Isaac, and they're main characters on the other side in the book. And anyway, I went to go see my Aunt Mabel, who lived in Elko, Nevada, after Isaac passed. And because I just love that woman anyway. She's just joy. She gave me all the little tidbits about her family and all the stuff about the Williams family that's in the book. So I got it from her. It was so that made it kind of special. But anyway, I went to go see her and talk to her and just visit. And in the morning, I had a hard time sleeping, so I got up pretty early, and I was standing. I was at her kitchen counter on my computer writing my book, Charlie and the Rainbow Trout. At the time, I was writing that. And so I was like trying to figure out the text for the illustration and kind of working on that kind of thing. And she must have seen the light on in the kitchen from her bedroom. And here she comes in. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And she's like, well, sweetheart. She was just like that kind of woman. She's like you a little bit. I must like, yeah, because you have that a little bit the same energy, that really sweet, like adorable personality. And she'd be like,
you're so sweet, thank you.
And she was like, well, sweetheart, what are you working on? And she gets a cup of coffee and she comes and stands next to me by the computer and she goes, well, show me what you're working on. And I pulled up this picture of one of the illustrations of the book, and it was me playing in the mud as a kid. And, she was like, oh, that's when you were such a small little kid. And we were reminiscing. And I was like, well, I'm, just trying to make Isaac proud of me, because when I see him again, I want to earn his smile, So I'm just trying to make him proud. And, and she goes, and then I was telling her about the next illustration, and all of a sudden, there she is standing. She's standing right next to me, and all of a sudden, she looks up to the ceiling and just pauses. It's just like still frame for a few seconds. And then she looks back at me and she goes, I just got a message. And the message is, good job, Mom. And she goes, that had to be Isaac. And that was the craziest thing. I watched her get a message from Isaac from the other side. Wow. It was like right out of the Bible. It was like one of those, wow, divine moments that you could have just written it. It was scripted. It was like amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. So, and she had, because in our family, the Williams family, we had lots of paranormal experiences, and she was one of them. And my mom's sister, and she was such a doll. Anyway, that was Aunt Mabel. And then you wanted me to talk about what's the next thing? Forgiveness. Yes. Well, the power of forgiveness is
how you achieved
and how, yeah, I know, because, in the book, I say something to the effect of, they're talking about forgiveness and Aunt Mabel and my Aunt Melba, who was murdered. So I bring these really big points up because if you can forgive your serial killer, murdering you, or you can forgive somebody killing your precious child, really honestly, you should be able to forgive a lot of the mundane things. But so I use these big examples because if you can forgive there, then surely we can forgive other things. But the route to forgiveness is sometimes very challenging. And in the book, my Aunt Melba says, I understand that forgiveness is a good virtue, but I need a bridge across the great chasm of hate and bitterness to the land of forgiveness, because you have all this hate and bitterness. And how do you get past that to the land of forgiveness, right?
Right.
And so, because theoretically, sure, it sounds like a great thing, right? But how do you get there?
Especially for her sister was murdered.
Right. And, it was Melba in the book saying this, like she's trying to forgive the person that murdered her.
Right.
And so for her, she was trying to forgive the person that killed her.
So Melba, so you were communicating with Melba.
No, I'm just saying that this is how I say this part in the book. And so, about forgiveness. And then, so the problem is like, we all know that forgiveness is a great idea. It's a good virtue, but how do you get there?
Right.
Right.
And how do you get there, kiddo?
Yeah.
How did you get there?
All I can say is how I got there. Is because the more you learn about forgiveness, it's kind of tangled up with judgment and also with hate and bitterness and all these things. And when you you have to kind of be able to step back out of it and look at it maybe objectively a little bit and say, for me, it was like when you know that somebody can make a mistake, I mean, I know that it was a mistake that the hospital made. They didn't do it intentionally. It wasn't like they were out to hurt Isaac, but it was gross negligence by all means. And that did result in his death. But is what I've learned is when you hold on to bitterness and hate, it only erodes your soul from the inside out. It's like a corrosive energy inside of your heart, and it just erodes you from the inside out. And you're the only one being taken down by it.
That's right. And where does all that hate go? It goes into your body, and sometimes it causes people to get sick.
Yeah, the body keeps score. And so, it's processing all that. And so you're only doing your huge disservice to your own heart by holding on to bitterness and hate, because it kills you. And the other person might, that's for them to deal with. It's not even your business, really. That's up to them to decide to hold themselves accountable or anything like that. And then I also, I take comfort knowing that when we cross, we all get to have that little life review.
Yeah.
And so I don't need to hold them accountable here, because they will be held accountable.
They will be accountable. That also comforts me. I think about that a lot, Charlie, and it helps me in my life. It's maybe not for me. It'll happen. They will cross over, and they will feel everything that they did to other people.
Right. They will be held accountable. So it's not even your burden. You don't have to keep it as a burden. In fact, it's just the burden that hurts you. Mm-hmm. And so I let it go by saying that damages me, that hurts my heart, and I'm already sick, and I already miss my, that's not a good.
You don't need that extra layer.
No, you don't need it. Only hurts yourself. So let it go. Let them be held accountable on their crossover or before that. But them being held accountable is their business. It's not really even yours. It's your business is like taking care of yourself and
to take care of your survival.
Right. You don't have to be judge and jury, because that's a big burden.
Right.
It's a big burden to be judge and jury.
Right. And you've got to worry about yourself and your own development. And I'm talking about healing and your own development. One of my favorite questions: how have you found that difficult situations offer surprising and powerful gifts for healing?
Well, when I told you about Isaac being really, really pretty and insightful, he really is just my little angel. But he's really insightful. When shortly after he crossed, I was looking at his journal, and he wrote in his journal at 14, he wrote this when he was 14, everything is a gift, even pain, and with those gifts we will eradicate hate and pursue knowledge. And I was like, brilliant. Wow, that is a profound thing for a 14-year-old to say.
You're not kidding.
And it speaks about the volume of pain he had, because when you know pain, you don't want others to suffer it. You try to help them away from pain. That's exactly what you're doing with this podcast. Is when you know something, you try to help others. That's
exactly
right. That's the caring part of a person. And so he said, everything is a gift, even pain, and with those gifts, we will pursue knowledge and eradicate hate. And so the way that big crises, I used to say, I lost Isaac, but I didn't lose Isaac. I don't say that anymore. I say it as a crisis. It was a massive crisis. And so the crisis can be the starting point of a great journey, of a spiritual awakening. And that certainly happened with Isaac and me, because I went through that journey with him, and then I learned all of the things that he taught me from the other side. And had that not happened, all those gifts I wouldn't have received all those gifts. And so sometimes we don't know what is going on or why it's happening, but we can trust later that it might present an answer later. And so we've got to be patient and kind with ourselves. It's a hard journey. And so...
And look at all the beautiful ways that you've healed as a result of this journey and this obstacle that you face and all.
Now I try to look at obstacles as like, okay, like I noticed that this is a difficult situation, but I don't say, oh, dang, this is just difficult. Now I say, okay, now what can I do with it?
And what's the lesson to be learned from it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. Now it's like, now what can I learn from this situation, rather than just see it as a difficult situation. It's
adding it to your backpack of misery and pain instead of, right?
Right, exactly. Don't just add it to your heap of like the sorrows of your life. You want to say, okay, I learned these things from this thing, and I learned this great thing from that, and so then it's really empowering because that, I don't know, that you're learning such valuable lessons in life.
That's right. This is part of your journey.
It's
that
part of
you
your journey.
chose. It changes the whole way you view
right, and
life. What's going on here.
That you honor your journey, not see it as a burden, that you honor your journey.
That's right. That's beautiful. And your book is so lovely. And I know you have a special promo for everyone today. Would you like to tell them about that?
Well, sure. I'll give 20 books away to the first 20 people that send me a message on my email, which is charliebynar@bynar.com, or Facebook Messenger app. And you just got to say that you saw us on Irene's show.
Rebirth. Yep. And we will send links for all of that. And what is the special Charlie tip for finding joy in life?
The tip for finding joy in life, I think, is something we touched on earlier, which was just knowing that our time here on earth is just one page, one chapter of a never-ending story. And with that said, that means death is an illusion, death is not the end, and that our loved ones are alive and well on the other side.
And that certainly does bring us joy. Charlie, Isaac and Saul have bestowed upon us a deeply sacred gift from the other side, an unwavering presence as our guardian angel, and a profound calling shaped by our spiritual awakening. Your journey shines as a guidance, and so do you. You're just a delight, offering hope and solace to those navigating the depths of grief, especially parents mourning their children and those burdened by profound loss or trauma. Through my books and this podcast, I strive to create a space for healing and transformation by amplifying the voices of extraordinary individuals like you. Together, we embody the truth behind Allison DuBois' profound insight. Sometimes life's most pivotal moments are merely guiding us towards a higher. From my heart, I thank you for sharing your so inspiring journey, your wisdom, and your healing insights with us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on your show. You're just such a sweetie.
Thank you. And so are you. And so I think we have a mutual admiration society now.
Yeah. Woo!
I'd like to say to be continued.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.